So I let ChatGPT design my laundry room, a computer designing my house. I went in thinking there is no way this turns out cute. Boy, was I surprised.
Hey y'all, I'm Kelly, and this is where cozy meets real life. Welcome to Kelly's Cozy Living.
You know I love a good cozy refresh, and this laundry room was long overdue, but this time I did something a little different. I asked ChatGPT to redesign it for me. I gave it a few things I knew I wanted, let it run with the ideas, and today I'm showing you the full remodel and how it all turned out. Oh, and my goal? Getting it all done for under $300. So let's get started. So the first thing on my list was clearing off that main wall, the one that was getting the new wallpaper and wainscoting boards. Once it was stripped down, I grabbed my wood for the wainscoting, and that ran me about $110. Good news for the budget though, I already had the paint on hand, Sherwin Williams Navajo White, so that part was basically free. Okay, quick confession before we move on. Don't look behind that door. I painted this room like 5 or 6 years ago, and I ran out of paint right at the end. So guess what's still not painted? That little strip behind the door. Nobody ever sees it because, well, it's behind the door. But I'm telling you because I want to keep it real. I could have just not mentioned it and you'd never have known. But now you know, so no judging when you spot it. I had a few old holes to deal with, nail holes, old anchor spots, that kind of thing. So I grabbed some spackling and filled those in before moving on. I used a 1x6 MDF board at eye level, and I actually already had the 1x6 that was the baseboard, so that saved me a little. I cut it down to length, and I'll be honest, holding a long board up with one hand while trying to nail it in place is not easy. My trick? I put one nail in the middle first, just enough to hold it in place, then grab my level to make sure it was straight before nailing it the rest of the way. For the vertical boards, I switched over to 1x4 MDF. Before I started nailing anything up, I took a minute to figure out the best layout. I wanted to make sure the electrical plug already in the wall didn't end up smack in the middle of a board, so I spaced everything out to work around it. At the top, I added a 1x4 MDF board to create a little picture ledge, just a small detail, but it adds a nice spot to set some decor or frames later on. Then I took a sander to that ledge board and just knocked off the corners a bit. Nothing fancy, just enough to soften the edges and give it a smoother, more finished look. After that, I used white latex caulk to fill in all the nail holes and seams. This is the trick that really makes it look like one seamless piece instead of a bunch of separate boards. And here's a little tip I always use. I dip my finger in water before smoothing the caulk. It keeps the caulk from sticking to your finger and gives you a much cleaner, smoother line. While that caulk was drying, I moved over to the cabinets. Now, these had homemade sliding barn doors that I'd built myself, and while the barn door look was adorable, Let's just say opening and closing them all the time was not practical. It was honestly kind of a pain. So I took those same doors down and swapped the barn door hardware for regular hinges instead. Same doors, just a much easier way to actually use them. Now, life happened, and it ended up being a few days before I got back to this room. But when I did, I went ahead and added the laundry baskets I'd ordered from Amazon. I'll drop that link in the description box, and you can also find them in my Amazon storefront. I went with a wooden wicker look to bring in a little extra warmth. These baskets used up about $90 of my budget, and I know most people probably wouldn't need 3, but I had space for 3, and I just love being able to separate clothes out that way. So why not? Originally, I was just going to leave the room blue, but once I really looked at it, I knew it needed a repaint. There were scuff marks everywhere, and if I was putting in all this other work, the walls needed to match that effort. So I asked ChatGPT to show me what accessible beige would look like, and I also asked it to suggest another color it thought would work well. It came back with Natural Choice, so off to the paint store I went and grabbed a quart. Funny moment though, when I pulled out my phone to double check the color name, Bill looked over and said, "Don't tell me ChatGPT picked that?" And I said, "Yep, he sure did." Finally, painting day arrived. I started with the wainscoting first. Then I moved on to the walls, and I'll be honest, at first I panicked a little. I thought ChatGPT had picked the wrong color, but once it dried, it was the perfect warm off-white beige. It looked so good. Honestly, this is a color I never would have picked on my own if it hadn't been for ChatGPT. That quart of paint ran me $26. It was the perfect amount, not a drop left. By this point, the house was such a mess, everything from the laundry room scattered all around, so I started moving things back in before tackling the next step. I just couldn't stand looking at that mess anymore. Okay, here's where I blew the budget a little, and honestly, I could have done better. For the wallpaper, I had this exact look in my head, but I couldn't find anything close to what I wanted. So since I already know how to design seamless patterns from my Etsy shop, I designed the perfect plaid with just a touch of blue myself. Only problem? That meant having a company custom print it for me. Since it was just one wall and only the top portion of it, I figured, let's just do it. I ended up spending $120 on that wallpaper. I went back and forth with myself on this one, so tell me in the comments, was it worth it? This was also the first time I used EasyHang, and wow, I loved it. It gave me time to actually move the wallpaper around and get it positioned right, since it was peel and stick. Under the picture shelf, I added some hooks. A few of these I actually already had since they'd been hanging in this spot before. For the pictures, I decided to add a few prints from my Etsy shop, the Farmhouse bundle. I dug out some old frames I already had, and this one's special. It's actually artwork I drew myself and framed all the way back in 1991. I pulled it out, and since the mat was red, I covered it with a neutral striped fabric to freshen it up and fit the new look. Then I took some off-white paint and dry brushed it over the gray frame, just enough to let that rustic texture peek through. To label the laundry baskets, I used that blue floral fabric you've seen throughout my 4th of July videos. I ripped it down to size, then layered a piece of white fabric on top, so the blue floral framed it out nicely. To give the white fabric a little age, I coffee stained it first, then set my sewing machine to a zigzag stitch with dark blue thread to stitch the white piece down onto the blue floral. That little detail gives it such a nice old cottage look. Then, using Waverly chalk paint in elephant and a Dollar Tree stencil, I stenciled the words right onto that white fabric for each basket label. To finish them off, I used hot glue to tack the labels onto each basket. That way, if I ever want to switch them out down the road, I can easily pop them off and change them. One more thing that really helped this whole refresh, I was able to free up extra space in the laundry room by moving my backstock down to another closet and shifting the stuff that used to live in the laundry room into what's now a true pantry. right off the laundry room. That gave me so much more room to move things around and make this space work so much better. And that's it, friends. The laundry room refresh is officially done. I am so in love with how this turned out. From the wainscoting to that custom plaid wallpaper to those little coffee-stained fabric labels, every detail just makes this room feel so much cozier than it did before. Now, let's talk budget for a second because I have to keep it real with y'all. My goal was $300 and I ended up at $358. So I went about $58 over. Was it worth it? For me, absolutely. But that custom wallpaper is what really pushed me over. So you tell me in the comments, was it worth it or should I have found a workaround? If you love this refresh, go check out the laundry basket link in the description box. Those are in my Amazon storefront. And the Farmhouse print bundle is over on my Etsy shop, Moonlight Wolf Studios, if you want that same look in your own home. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new here, and I will see you in the next one.